Hello and welcome to Two Words Wolves Pod. I'm Ryan Eichten, and with me, as always, is Leo San. Leo, how you doing?
I'm here, Ryan. I'm here. I spent the last 18 hours in the Bay Area. I caught about a 6:30 a.m. flight right back to SoCal, and I went straight to my day job. So I'm a bit exhausted, but we're here. We're here to give the people what they want, Ryan. So I'm ready to talk about my experience up there at Chase Center.
Yeah, awesome. Bit of role reversal for us. Usually, I'm the one covering the games, and this time it's you. How was your experience out there in the Bay? You got a bit of a weird one, kind of back to the weird vibes losses. What were your just overall thoughts about maybe the stadium, San Francisco, or the game itself?
Yeah, I'm originally from Northern California and closer to the Sacramento region, but I mean, that's not that far from the Bay. And I've gone to a handful of Warrior games, but that was back when they were in Oakland. And so this is actually my second time covering a game at Chase Center for the Warriors. Last year I came back the day right after my honeymoon from Japan, super jet lagged. And I went to the game the very next day. And that was game one of the back to back in Golden State. And I was super tired and I was probably a little bit sick, but I did it anyways. But it was a great experience that first time because that's a game that I got to talk to Karl-Anthony Towns and meet his family. And, he expressed his gratitude for the piece that I wrote to him, my open letter to Karl-Anthony Towns last year. And so the media was there ready to kind of greet me when I was there. I didn't even know that they knew I was coming, but that was cool. And so when I went back this time, I had a really great experience as well, too. Their staff is super on top of their stuff. When I showed up in the media room, the workroom, I was there with Dane and John and Chris Hine, and we all had our little names up in the media workroom. But then I also saw my name up, which didn't surprise me. But they also had the mascot of my college that I finished my bachelor's at, and my master's at Sac State, with their little mascot next to my name. And I was like, wait, what is this? Was this like a random grab? And Dane and John were like, no, man, they do their research on you when you come over here, and they find out like where you graduated from, and they do that. So it's very personalized. It was very cool. And the arena, it's still really new. Obviously, I think they've only been in that arena about I think 5 years or so, not too long, but still really shiny, really up to date. And it was just overall a good time. Everything is really convenient there. If y'all ever plan to come to Northern California or California in general, highly encourage you to stop by Chase Center, catch a Warriors game. Even though there is that stereotype that the tickets are priced out now that they're from Oakland to San Francisco, it's surprising the amount of really dedicated and loyal fan base that they have up there, because they got really loud, and we'll get into the games later, but they were really loud up there, very similar to also Sacramento. I think just here in Northern California, they really love their sports. So the home crowds were great. The environment was great and the vibes were great. It's not quite the outcome that us Wolves fans and media would have wanted.
Yeah, that's pretty cool that they they do the research. I've only been to a handful of arenas as media, so I've definitely not heard of that. That's pretty cool. But yeah, we'll just hop right into it. Of course, you'll fill us in with anything that you saw there at the locker room and whatever else throughout the game. But we're gonna start off Howl or Foul right off the top. Topic one: the Timberwolves need more from Anthony Edwards. I'm gonna start us off here and say how I rewatched the game, specifically the second half today, and what stuck out to me was how much of the second half kind of lays on the shoulder of Anthony Edwards in that specific game. I wrote down, I don't know what the NBA technically calls a fast break point, but in my personal definition of a fast break point, the Wolves gave up 19 of them in the third quarter. And by my eye, every single one of them was either off an Ant turnover, or Ant was the one either not getting back, or one of the two people that could have or should have gotten back. Every single one of those 19 points were on Ant in my eyes, at least partially. And so I know I probably harp on this too much, because the guy's probably going to end up, hopefully, as the best player this franchise has ever seen, and is probably already the second best that they've ever seen. And so it feels weird to overly criticize the guy that had their best offensive game in that game. But as I've kind of harped on so much, he is the leader of this team. There's no one there. It is him and kind of him alone. As far as just like the superstar, the mega talent that it is. And to me, that's the type of stuff that frustrates me. And everyone has bad quarters. Everyone has bad halves. Everyone has, and to say the fast break points were all on him is not true, because this person didn't get back or that person didn't get back, or like it was on the whole team. But the one that did stick out in my mind was Ant. And I just wonder how much like him doing that like filters into the rest of the roster, and like they just need him to lead by example in that case. And he is a very good leader, especially when it comes to like we saw the first Warriors win. He gives compliments to every single other teammate, and that is fantastic. And he does so many good, but like there's just something not quite there as like a mega superstar. And again, it's a very high bar that I'm setting for him, but to me, it's the type of thing that Anthony Edwards is going to have to start doing if they want to win a championship. And something that bothers me, who's someone in the locker room, is when he declines media. Um, as far as Chris Hine skeeted it out, is that what we're saying? He posted
That's
on
good.
Blue Sky,
Maybe.
and you experienced it as well. That as far as I could tell, you guys or the main beat writers requested Ant to talk, and he declined, citing he didn't want to get fined for swearing. Sure, fine. But you can get fined for declining media too. So I'm not sure that entirely makes sense. But like, I just kind of think of after a bad game, would Steph decline media? Would LeBron? I'm kind of asking, to be honest, because I don't cover those teams. But my guess is no. And to me, that just kind of seems like a little bit of, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, where he hasn't fully embraced this role yet of being the super duper only singular megastar on this team. And he's going to need to do that before the Wolves are able to kind of take the next step post cat trade.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think that's a fair assessment. I think it's a fair criticism of him. I mean, to use this whole superhero trope, Ant-Man, and let's talk about Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility, right? And we all know how much power that Ant has and what he's capable of doing. And with that, he has to take responsibility, not just always just with his words or doing media, but also what he does on the court and getting back. So I do agree with you. Sunday's loss could go squarely on him. And I think he'll be the very first person to raise his hand, as he did in the locker room. I mean, he was 0 for 6 in crunch time. If he missed a game, he was only credited with 1 turnover, but really 2 of them were his turnovers. And that's just not acceptable in a game like this, where they could have nearly clinched the tiebreaker with a team that they may be fighting for at the end of the season for seeding. They could have taken both games in Golden State, and that would have been huge. So it was a big game for him to lose, and especially after such a great game that he had on Friday in the same arena, and he was talking mad trash to Steph, to Dre, to the crowd, and to follow it up. I mean, he really dropped the ball there. So I do agree with you there. Now, I will say for how or foul, the Timberwolves need more from Anthony Edwards. I'm going foul. And the reason I'm saying foul, it's despite him not making himself available for the media, he didn't shy away from vocalizing his thoughts. As we know, he is painfully honest sometimes. And as soon as he walked into the locker room, the very first thing that I heard out of his mouth was just like, F, like I sold that game, bro. Like, damn, like, and he was just like, expletive, like a lot of expletives, right? And it wasn't like for show. It's not like he saw us come in and he started talking. Like he was going off and he was beating himself up over it. And it wasn't, it was a little bit of a somber locker room in there. Obviously, after a loss, I mean, guys aren't the most happy or whatnot. But I think they saw that Ant was really disappointed in himself, and they kind of gave him the room to be able to do that. And he started going off a little bit more about how. He's cursing a lot, and he's talking about like, oh, well, I don't want to get fined because, when I talk to you and I curse, I get fined for it. And then he went off on a little tangent. He was walking back to the showers about, you know, all these other MVPs, like, they're getting all the calls and stuff, but me, I don't get shit. And then when I'm like cursing about it after the game, like they don't want me to curse, or they're out here trying to change who I am. They're trying to change me, and it kind of went down
Mm-hmm.
a different rabbit hole. And we're like, all right, let's give Ant time to kind of cool down. And maybe when he comes back, maybe he'll want to talk to media, but that didn't end up happening. The clip that was put out there, I think on Twitter, Dave Moore posted, and I think it's out there now as well too, just in the Timberwolves social media put it out. The Julius Randle's post-game availability while he was talking Ant's locker, who was located right next to him in the Warriors visitor locker room, stands up right next to, he was right behind Chris Hine, where he starts going like, man, like if I just found the open guy, if they got 3 or 4 dudes on me, like I got to pass the ball, that's on me. Like I sold that game. Like, I know you guys don't mind if I don't, if I cuss, but they mind if I cuss, and, I stink it up. He was really saying that. And it was almost as if he was trying to put it out there so that Julius Randle didn't have to answer the question of why did things break down at the end? right? And so for me, that is a sort of accountability that he's taking. Now, I think that that poor end of it did a little bit overshadow what great of a night he was having. He was having another really efficient night. He had 30 points already at that point. He had hit that big three to go back up one after, Nikhil was, dragging the Wolves back into it. And before that final stretch of, 4 minutes and 37 seconds or whatever it was, he had 30 points on 10 of 13 shooting, and he had 30 points on really efficient shooting the night before. And he was passing the ball. He had a handful of those assists that he had were to Nikhil Alexander-Walker to get him those points. And so, I think that it's not that they need more in essence from me. I don't think they need more of Anthony Edwards. They need a smarter Anthony Edwards. And by smarter, I mean, yeah, yes, you can get into that hero ball mode. You got to snap yourself out of it. You got to be smarter. Yes, you're frustrated, and yes, you'll talk during Julius Randle's media availability to kind of take accountability, but be smarter. Like, you raise your hand, be like, you know what? Let me go first. Let me answer the questions, right? So I think that's not they need more. They need a smarter version of him.
Yeah, I generally agree. And maybe it's my own bias. Maybe it's something I'm having trouble putting into words, but I just think there's something missing, and maybe it's the team wide, and me putting it on Ant specifically is unfair. But I just, here's a quote, because what happened, what you're saying with Ant, like talking through the media over other players, basically happened against the Sacramento loss, where he declined to talk to media that night, and he wasn't directing it as media as much, but he was talking loudly about, oh shoot, that was the Heat game. So I guess it happening is after the Heat game. They're talking about the zone
The
that
inbound,
he's running.
the zone,
and the inbounds and all that. But a quote that Finch gave after the Kings game was, "It's like Groundhog Day. We're playing the same game every night. We get down, fight back, run out of gas, can't close. That's what we've been doing." And that's what like stands out most to me with this team is every single recent loss has gone to that exact same way.
Right.
Where, I mean, at least with last night, they weren't down early, but they got down late in the third, early in the fourth. They rallied back pretty quickly, and then they ran out of gas at the end. And to me, like, that is as much on Ant as anyone else. And so all the soft stuff in the sense of like the hustle, the focus, like that stuff is on Ant as much as anyone to me. And they just kind of need a little bit more than him. And again, maybe it's unfair, and they weren't expecting stuff like this from him because they had Cat and because the defense was so locked in. They could deal with an Ant that was that would have lapses in focus and stuff, and now they just can't. And they probably couldn't even last year because they weren't good enough to win the title last year either. So, and my thing would be, is he's going to figure this out? I am unbelievably confident that anytime Ant like displays something about his game that isn't quite working or needs to be improved, it fixes it incredibly quickly, faster than most other people. So, but that doesn't stop me from just believing that
Sure.
they just need, like, maybe just basically he needs to be a first team All NBA type player, or else they're not going to win the title and they're not going to make the finals. And he just hasn't been that for one reason or another so far this year.
Yeah, we saw that in that first game on Friday against the Warriors, where he was hitting some really tough shots. He hit that 4-point play, right? Those really memorable plays, which really unlocked the rest of it, where he switched that mindset where it's like, okay, well, I got my scores. The game's still kind of in the balance. And then you start intentionally finding Rudy, right? He hit him with those two lobs that, after the game, Rudy was like, oh, it felt like Christmas out there. Ant was fighting me for all these lobs. And so we've seen that glimpse of like, Ant is able to make that turn. He doesn't have to take every single shot. I think yesterday, like after he made that 3-pointer to go up one with, a handful of minutes left or about half the quarter left, instead of really starting to switch over like, hey, Nikhil's hot, I got to feed him, or hey, this, our perimeter shooting is going to open up our interior, I got to move the ball a little bit faster. He wanted just one more. You could tell he wanted one more shot. Like with each miss, he got more and more like antsy to like, oh, I got to fix that. All right, let me just get one more. Let me get one more. And then one missed shot turned to two missed shots, turned to three, turned to another turnover, right? And just kept going. You saw it spiraling out of control. It was one of those, car crash in slow motions where, I think it was really funny afterwards when they asked Rudy about, some of that late game, collapse. He was like, oh yeah, it felt like Christmas the other day. It felt like today was more like Halloween. right? Whereas it was scary because it's like
Hmm.
they've seen this before. They've seen it happen, like you mentioned. They've seen it a couple times this season already, and so it is a little bit disappointing. But yeah, Ant does need to elevate his teammates a little bit more, because if he's not going to do it, no one else is going to be able to. There's no cat, as you mentioned. There's not that same safety net of another player where it's like, all right, well, if Ant's not hitting it, then we'll just dump it down to Julius Randle, see what happens. Like that hasn't bore too much fruit right now, other than the game winning three. So he'll have better days. He'll have better days for sure.
Yeah, the fourth quarter didn't bother me as much as the third quarter
The
did.
third quarter,
But the third quarter, and then like I mean, there's plenty. He the bucket that tied the game was Buddy Hield got a three, and it
right?
was his missed assignment there, which happens to everyone. But yeah, fourth quarter, last 4 minutes and 7 seconds of the game, Ant was over 6 with the turnover, and it probably should have been 2 turnovers,
Two,
but
yeah,
the shot clock
went
violation,
off
the shot clock went off, and that
team,
goes in
yeah,
as a team turnover. That
right.
was he had thrown the ball away as the shot clock was going off, so that in my mind goes on him as well. But he was fantastic offensively before that 4 minute stretch, like doing everything, like perfect Anthony Edwards game. And I think it just, like you said, he tried to take it over, missed. I mean, usually if he takes six tough shots, he's going to make one or two of them. Just didn't go in that way. Not to like excuse his shot selection, which wasn't great, but that kind of leads us into the next topic. Howell Fowl and then sitting Mike down the stretch. Kind of been a thing the whole season where they've been mixing and matching late game offense, late game lineup combinations. They've taken Nas out for Randall out for Nas. They've got Nikhil in there for Jaden. This is the first time Mike has sat. So to me, Howell, I would have liked to see Mike in there. But I understand like Nikhil kind of had to play down the stretch. Julius was playing well. Like he didn't deserve to be taken out. I mean, maybe that was like the play was to take Randall out, put Mike in for him, and play small down to the Warriors level. But that kind of goes to like stuff we've like. If Randall's going to start getting taken out of games that he doesn't deserve, like when he is one of their 5 best players in the game, like that's not going to breed good results down the road for him. So I think they should have tried to find a way to get Mike in there, and I think a lot of like the Ant stuff down the stretch would have been lessened if Mike was in there. But I also don't think it's like this glaring huge mistake, like a dumb idiot mistake that they made.
Yeah, as far as should was it a mistake for sitting Mike at the end of the stretch? I'm saying foul for that. Having Mike could have helped, obviously. And in hindsight, we're like, oh well, obviously, yeah, we should have had another ball handler. We should have had him out there. But yeah, as you mentioned too, I was going to say the same thing. Is that Nikhil had it going, and Nikhil was the natural sub for Mike. That's been a sub pattern all year, and Nikhil was really getting whatever he wanted, and he was really fighting on defense as he always does. And so, maybe was it right to leave Mike Nikhil in instead of Mike? Maybe, but shouldn't it have been Jaden McDaniels instead of Mike? Maybe not. Should it have maybe even been Rudy Gobert, which we'll get into him a little bit more, but he was quite frazzled in that fourth quarter. The crowd was getting really, really loud. It started with a couple chants in the third quarter of Gobert sucks. Gobert sucks, and then turned into a mass chorus of Gobert sucks ringing throughout the thing, and it really kind of egged him on, and Rudy kind of lost his head for a little bit as well too, especially early in that fourth quarter when they were in that big drought. And so, maybe Rudy should have came out, but the Warriors are really hitting from three, so I would like to see a little bit better perimeter defense here. Obviously, Curry and Kuminga had that pick and roll game going, and there wasn't much. Rudy wasn't getting rotating back, or low man wasn't coming over fast enough either. So again, maybe Rudy should have been coming out, but I don't think him coming out would have stopped it, because again, as I mentioned earlier, Ant was locked into his kill mode, and he was just so thirsty for a basket that I felt like even if KD was out there, Ant wasn't going to pass him the ball. Ant was going to shoot that. He's going to shoot that every time. Like some of the shots that he was taking, again, for those of you who maybe didn't see the game, or didn't rewatch it, he was taking like 10 dribbles, and he was like shot fake, pivot, shot fake, pivot, and then like a leaner floater into the lane that like wasn't even close to like going in. And so those are shots where it's like, dude, I don't think having Mike Conley out there would have stopped him. Like, yeah, maybe he could have gotten off the ball a little bit earlier, but he was going to demand it back right after. So yeah, it was, again, could have made a difference maybe, but I think that Ant was going to doom him or get him the victory either way. It didn't matter who was in there.
Yeah, Jace Frederick tweeted this out, but the Mike Conley is the only positive player in clutch time, and everyone else is like beyond terrible.
Yeah.
To me, that is more that to me is like is on the coaching staff in terms of Finch has said like we need to run more sets down the stretch, and that's just absolutely true. And maybe that's on the players like to not like they didn't run the sets that the coaches called or whatever, but they just need to figure they've just been so terrible again in clutch time. Randall's and Ant are their next two best players, and they're just negative, double digit. Like they're just getting torched late in games anytime the game is close. They were fine early in the year, and now they just like the Suns game recently was like a clutch time win. They just are not. I don't know what it is. Why they are running out of gas at the end of all of these games, or um, why they're not executing. Because like they have stretches clearly like where they're as good as any team in the league, and then just down the stretch of these games can't put it together.
Well, you kind of mentioned it earlier. I mean, it was that huge hole that they dug themselves in the third quarter. As we saw the Rockets game, the Celtics game, and the Kings game, where they had to battle back from being down big, and it's got to affect their legs. It's got to affect like the way that they're playing, the energy that they have. So I think that was definitely part of it. And Chris Finch said after the game in the post game presser where he was saying that usually in a game he can deduce it down to one single like part of the game that's where they lost the game. He said in this game it happened. There were two spots. One was that third quarter run where the Warriors really got ahead big, and then also obviously the end of the fourth quarter. So I think that third quarter where they lost the game resulted in them not being able to finish later on. So that's probably part of it. Of course, very nuanced. It depends, but yeah.
Yep, absolutely. All right, on to topic 3. Is the Wolves defense back in terms of comparing them to last year, or just where we think they should be? Holler foul on that, Leo.
I'm going how the defense is back, and that is definitely one positive thing to come into, even despite that loss yesterday. They've been really shutting teams down. I mean, we saw it. Obviously, the rotation is a little bit different for the Warriors, and you get that second game of a baseball series where they got to make some adjustments. But game one, they did a great job making it tough for Steph Curry. They did a great job just kind of walling up, playing that frenetic defense that held the Clippers and held the Lakers to 80 points or whatnot, right? So I do think the defense is back. You did a really great job highlighting kind of the before and after of where we saw the Wolves kind of turn that corner on Candace Hoopus. For those of you who haven't read that piece, I suggest you go and take a look at it. It comes with video clips and breakdowns. It's really great. But, I have to admit that I'm feeling a little bit anxious about our undetermined bet on if the team finishes top 10 in defensive rating or offensive rating. Yeah, if you missed one of our earlier season episodes, we had talked about, Ryan feels like the defensive rating will probably finish top 10. And I was like, well, I think the offense rating might finish top 10. And so we got to nail that down later, Ryan, about what we're betting on this. But right now it is looking good for you. I'm not going to cop out. I'll stay with whatever I had originally kind of hedged myself on. But yeah, as far as the defense, back to that, I think we were bound to we were bound it was bound to take a few months for it to really start to gel, and we're really seeing it now. And so they've talked about it being their identity, and I think part of what they lost yesterday, in addition to obviously that third quarter run and that fourth quarter drought, was also because their defense, right? Their defense, which was their identity, they lost that. And so because when they lose that, then they lose games. And so I do think the defense is back. There's some transition things that they got to fix. There's a couple little things here and there, but I feel confident with your side of the bet for sure. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to say Hal. Like you said, I wrote a whole long piece on Canis about the defense being back with just clips, and like it's their defense is going to be very, very good. It probably won't be as good as last year, just considering Cat was such a big part of the defense, and just because they had a bad start to the year, to be honest. But yeah, it's back, and like the reason why they give up points are like our transition opportunities and stuff like that. Like it's not schematic. So that kind of leads us into the next holler foul. Will transition defense be a problem all season? I'm gonna go foul just because it hasn't been a gigantic issue so far this year. It was early, and they've made a concerted effort to like get back on defense, and they just didn't do that last night. I like I said, Ant was a gigantic part of that. Was not getting back. The turnovers weren't helping. I just think once they get back to making concerted effort, it won't be as bad as it was. But ultimately, teams are going to continue to push the ball because that's the only place you can find good offense against this Timberwolves team is just running. Because when you get into half court, as we've seen, the Wolves are going to make it extremely tough for you to score points efficiently.
Yeah, as far as is the transition defense going to be a problem all year, I'm going with how. I agree with that statement. Opposite to you, but I think it's more personnel wise. I don't necessarily disagree with your statement about that, foundationally that there's a huge issue with the defense, but I think every defense is going to have a weak point, and I think our weak point will be transition. And again, as I mentioned, personnel wise, you think about how many shots Ant took. I mean, it was so evident, not even, yes, in the third quarter, but even the fourth quarter when he was missing shots, when he was going hero ball mode. Not only was he missing shots, but he was kind of making some reckless, like offensive rebound attempts
Yep.
that put himself behind the play as well, too. And so, Ant's not necessarily someone that's great at getting back, especially after those tough shots that he takes. I think they've encouraged Jaden to corner crash a little bit more as well, too. And that's come with, a good amount of reward. But again, he's not necessarily the first line of defense getting back. Rudy's always going to be Rudy, right? Rudy's not going to be near the perimeter. He's not going to be above the break. So he's never going to be the first one back. I mean, he does try to do his best effort to get back on defense. He's always trying to hustle back, but is Rudy going to solve the transition defense? I don't think so, just because of where he's placed offensively on the other end of the court. And then Julius is going to be Julius, right? That's probably one of his weakest points is getting back, especially even the way that he plays offense, similar to Ant. It's like a combo of Ant and Rudy. Like Julius takes tough shots, and those tough shots result in like weird bounces off the rim. And then he's always like clawing and scratching and trying to fight for offensive rebound where it's like, no, man, you should probably get back, or if he's not on the floor, in Nasri fashion, but also because of like similar to Rudy, he's under the hoop. So even if he does sprint back, he's not going to be first back. And so I do think it's going to be on Finch to get it through to his guys, mainly Ant and Julius. Like y'all can't just it's not your job to offense rebound after a missed shot. And especially, off a turnover, y'all got to be the first ones to get back because y'all are the ones with the ball in your hands as often or above the break. So, yeah, I do think that it will be a weakness, but will it hinder the defense from being a top 10 one? I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just like their defense is going to be so good and that teams are just going to have to push. So maybe it's going to like seem worse than it is just by the pure volume of it. But I just think if they just continue to make a concerted effort to get back, Ant taking a leadership role or whatever in that area, and ideally reducing turnovers, that always lead to transition points, that'll help. And that, again, leads us into our final topic. The Wolves offense is currently 17th in net rating, offensive rating, and that is exactly where it was last year. Even after an offseason of basically talking about focusing on getting that offensive rating up, I think everyone agrees that it's going to be very hard to win multiple playoff series in a row with a below average NBA offense, even if the defense is historically great like it was last year. But howl or foul that they would continue to be a below average offense by the end of the year.
I think it's a foul. I think that 17th is probably their floor. I mean, I think we're seeing right now that it is kind of a chicken and the egg situation sometimes with the defense and the offense. That it feels like sometimes when the defense gets better, so does the offense. They start pushing transition more. We saw that a lot, especially in those LA games where they were making a concerted effort to really push the ball, make or miss. They were going, and it was yielding great results. And I think that the shooting numbers have gone up as well too. I mean, for as much hand wringing as we do about Julius Randle and he's such a black hole. I mean, he's shooting 10 of 20 from three in the month of December, or 10 of 20 from three in the month of December so far. 5 of their top 7, I'm excluding Rudy Gobert from this, are shooting 40% or better from distance. I think it's just Dante and Naz that are below 40% right now. So I think those numbers are ticking up. The reason I think the defense has fallen off partially is because we've been blowing some teams out. I mean, there's like 2 to 3 games that we blew teams out, and then we were having our second, third stringers in there. If you had the offense in there, then maybe. And I understand that with offensive rating, it's not just purely like the end of the game numbers, but I think when you're blowing out a team, you're not that concerned about, okay, well, let's run our best offense when we're out there. So I think that has affected numbers a little bit, but I do think that 17th is the floor. I don't think it'll get any worse than that. Do you think the offensive rating will get better or worse from 17th, right?
Yeah, I think it'll get better. But I am concerned about how much better. Because to me, it's got to get up to like 10th or at least close. Because to me, the type of offense that they're playing right now is just not going to be good enough. They can have a similar run to where they have last year, where if they get a good there, if they're better than their first round opponent and get a nice matchup in the second round, but like they're going to hit an opponent like Dallas, where your defense can only do so much, and you're going to need to match them on the offensive end. And so far, they've just not shown the ability to just like go on huge spurts. Um, so I'm just concerned that yeah, I agree their floor could be around 17th, but I'm worried that their ceiling might be 10th and that they might not ever get there. Like a few areas that they just need to get, the turnovers just need to get way better.
Right. I agree.
Those have been an issue multiple times. They need more pace, and when they run, they need to convert because they had a 3-on-1 last night that didn't get converted, and that's been a thing all year where they just are not converting even when they run. So that similar to like getting back on defense, pushing the ball on offense is also like needs to be like a point of emphasis every game, like run, and that they were doing that well in that the winning streak when their defense was allowing them to run. And then just like I think better shooting from a couple guys. Like Nas has been in an extended slump, and Dante just really has never had a solid run of more than a game or two. And I just don't know. I think I caught him on the broadcast like slapping his chair in frustration. I don't know what that was specifically about, but it's just weird how he just can't seem to get it going. And I continue to believe that it's going to turn around. I have no reason to believe it's anything more than like just an extended slump or a new team dip. But it'd be really nice if both of those guys just went on a heater, because I think if they started shooting a ton of threes at volume at high percentage, I mean, not a hot take, but like they'd start ripping off games like they have.
Yeah, it's funny you bring those two names up because those are two guys that, as we were in the locker room waiting for media availability, so I'll keep this at somewhat of a anonymous type vibe. There were two players that I overheard that were complaining about their minutes and saying that again, not naming names, that I'm like I'm just as good. I'm better than that guy, and like this wouldn't happen on another team. Like, how am I going to catch a rhythm? I'm only going to get this many minutes, and again, I will leave it anonymous, but I'll let you all deduce like who those two guys were that were kind of complaining about that. And I do think that, the minutes and the rotation, yes, there's been a solid top eight, that's been going out there and playing every single night. But, we are seeing guys that are getting pulled maybe a little bit early when they're not having a good stint, or guys that, just aren't getting that same leash because, we're running some of these guys such heavy minutes. And so, I do think it will turn around. I think another thing we didn't mention was, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but you and Andrew talked about a little bit, but about Rob. It was asked during the post game presser to Chris Finch about, oh, well, y'all have extended, break now, and it's headed to weekend, only a couple, one game, and then you're in the weekend. Do you think the thought is to rest Rob a little bit extra so he'll be ready to come back into the lineup? And he did say, yeah, that's the thought. That's the plan. That's the hope, right? Is that he'll be back, for this next stretch, these next two games here. So, we don't know if he'll be available, but let's not discount how well Rob was making the offense look when he was out there. Yes, he had a couple, bad rookie turnovers. I think it was the Kings game where he just like threw the ball away twice. But I think having Rob out there, I think will help with, unlocking the guys and getting more paint touches and moving the ball a little bit more. So I think, those are all things that could potentially help. Now, will it hurt the defense a little bit? Maybe, but I do think that there is a lot of meat left on the bone for the offense.
Yeah. And with the defense playing up to where we think they can be, that is hopefully like a more easy way to get Rob some minutes where you're able to easily kind of hide his size there. But we'll move on to Apex Alpha, who we will share who we thought the leader of the pack was this week. Leo, who is your Apex Alpha?
As much as we talked about him, I still have to say that my Apex Alpha is Anthony Edwards. He didn't have a great game against I think it was the first game of the week that he had last week. I think against, was it the Lakers? He kind of had like a okay game, and the Clippers kind of, he's starting to come together. And then, that first Warriors game, he had a really good game then as well too. But then, that Warriors game again, we remember we have that recency bias of, oh, well, he lost us that last, half of that game that, gave us that L to break our losing streak. But, I mentioned earlier about his offensive efficiency. I mean, he took the Warriors' soul and crushed them on Friday. I mean, it was such a, if you're a hater of the Warriors, like I can be at sometimes, it was amazing to watch. He nearly did so again on Sunday. When he hit that three, he started skipping back, the offensive end. He started mouthing off again. He was talking to the crowd. He was talking to the bench. And we're like, all right, here we go again. And had it not been for that final stretch that he had, we would have gotten a similar result. And then, the front page on Monday, today would have been about how Anthony Edwards is here and he should be in the MVP conversation again. He's taking his scoring to the next level. He's getting his teammates involved, blah blah blah. So yeah, that misstep, but I still think that overall for the week, I might give it to Anthony Edwards, and even to give him a little bit credit again on the accountability that he took and imposing himself. I mean, defensively, yes, there's a lot more he can do, but we saw some times there were some stretches in that first half where he was really getting in after it on defense. And I was looking around on media row with Dane and John and Chris, and there were some plays that he made, just not even like deflections at box score numbers, but just staying in front of his man and battling around screens. We're like, wow, like Ant's getting into them right now. So Ant's my Apex Alpha of the week. How about you?
Yeah, I like your Apex Alpha in the sense of like he was just so close to just absolutely dominating the
Right.
week. Before the bad stretch, he was 10 of 13 with 5 threes.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, I talked about the third quarter defense stuff, but like if they just run better offense and they win that game, like all that goes away.
Right.
So that's why the loss stinks. But my Apex Alpha was Rudy Gobert. He's back to depoy quality play. He almost certainly won't win the award because the Wolves will win fewer games than last year, and they're not all these awards are so narrative driven, for better or for worse. And Rudy has never had the narrative on his side when in this type of stuff, and that's a perfect example of just the Draymond Green of it all. We obviously know Draymond's feelings about Rudy, but at the end of that game, he gets his dunk, he does the night-night thing. It's clearly about Gobert. And you watch that play, it was Jaden's mistake. Curry sets a definitely legal screen. Definitely
a Warriors
not,
level screen. Draymond Green inspired screen.
A dynasty-inspiring screen.
Right.
Even if it wasn't illegal, like Jaden didn't call it out and didn't help, and Draymond gets an easy. It wasn't on Rudy. And that's just such like all the social media clips are Rudy like gave up the dunk, Rudy this. It's like, but he dominated the first game, and there's nothing, and it's like you hear the Warriors fans say Rudy sucked. Okay, if Rudy sucks, then your team is garbage because your team just got absolutely blown out by a guy who sucks. So what is that like? It's the NBA social media stuff that drives people like us just insane, because it's just like a clip of a. Like, why is Draymond getting the benefit of the doubt on anything this sort of related? He was good and he was fantastic in the game, but can we circulate the clip of Rudy blocking him in the first quarter? Like, it's just, it's so frustrating that just yeah.
So go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was just going to move us on to Play of the Week, because I think it's going to be a similar topic. Who did the Wolves make their Play of the Week, Leo, for you?
Yeah, the Play of the Week. So you mentioned earlier that, with Draymond, sometimes the loudest voice in the room is the voice that gets heard, is the one that everyone remembers. And there's no louder voice in the room than Draymond Green. And Draymond Green is my Play of the Week. I don't care that he got a win. I don't care that he did that night celebration. Like, to me, that is so cringe the way he did it. Like, when Steph does it, it's cool, right? Like, even though we know Taurean Prince is the real OG night celebration guy, but when Steph Curry does it, it's cool. He hits a big shot, does the night, he walks the other way. But once Draymond did, Draymond was dreaming for this moment to have a big play, at the end of the game. And again, you take all that into consideration, which you said that Rudy wasn't even like the guy who was supposed to come over and defend him, but like, the game was already over. The Wolves were barely like defending at that point. Like, they're just kind of like, whatever. It was like less than a minute left. And so, but as soon as Draymond drove, all he was thinking about was that celebration he was going to do. And so as soon as he dunked it, he ran the other way. He looked, oh my God, it was so, as like the kids would say, it was so cringe the way that he did it. He like put that up tight against his cheek, and he was like almost like screaming as he was running, doing the night, and he was like trying to run back on defense. It just looks so awkward. And like, man, I don't get it. I don't give an F about that. Rudy, like you said, Rudy was largely beating him in that matchup, and also the night before where he dunked on Draymond and got an and one off him. He blocked him a bunch of times, and he had a handful of like and ones. Everything. He was dominating him. And meanwhile, like Draymond Green, being the big crybaby that he is, was a minus 15 in game one. And there were 3 players on the Warriors that were a net negative on the court. And Draymond Green was one of them. He was a minus 3 as well, too. So again, I know single game plus minus is not the end all be all, but again, like, the reason that the Warriors won the game, especially in that third quarter period where they went on that run. It wasn't because Draymond was out there, it's because they're hot shooting. And like, yes, his defense did play a part in slowing things down later on, but for him to act like, oh, this is a me show, like he's been waiting for this. Like, imagine him having to go and pod after losing twice to Rudy Gobert. He's been dreaming for this moment for ever since the last time we played them. He's been dreaming about this since the playoffs, when all he could do was go on national TV to try and be like, all right, I got to disparage this guy. Like, it's cute, Draymond. Like, it's cute. You're a one-time defensive player of the year. You're a two-time runner-up. Call us when you get forward, man. So Draymond Green is my player of the week, no matter what.
I mean, the Wolves have beaten them the past 5 times.
Right.
Like, but like, it's like, my larger thought is, it's like, I'm just not really scared of that Warriors team. Maybe I'll come to regret that. The Wolves are just so much better than that team. And maybe whatever. It's not to say they can't beat the Wolves, because the Wolves certainly have shot themselves in the foot a lot this year, and that could just continue. But like, I just don't like, what is their record now? 14-9. They're 2.5 games above the Wolves. So like, they're winning more games, and maybe that will continue. But like, I just like this idea of maybe that like the Warriors are going to be this championship contender again. I don't see it with that team. They have so many mismatched parts, and good on them for getting a split. I've never seen someone celebrate a tie in a series so much.
Remember what Steph Curry said to Ant after Ant was kind of yelling at him? What did Steph say back to Ant? Do you remember?
No.
Steph said, right back. He said, we'll be right back. Like, we're going to play it. We're running it right back. Well, guess what, Warriors? In a week or two, we're running it back again. Okay, and this time's to be in Minnesota. So I'm anxiously awaiting that game 3 that's coming up in a couple weeks here. So they'll be right back.
Yep. Well, speaking of teams, I'm not necessarily afraid of from a Wolves perspective. My play of the week was the city of Los Angeles. After the Sacramento loss, the Wolves season was in the crapper, it felt like. And what can get you back is playing some teams that you are not as good as you. And to me, both Los Angeles teams fit that bill. Obviously, they were on the two of the last 3 wins were against. They were on the second night of a back-to-back, so maybe a grain of salt there. But again, I watched that Lakers team, and I'm like, that is a team that is not in the Wolves stratosphere, even if AD is playing close to an MVP level like he has. Just a single game, but LeBron he was bad in that Wolves game.
I don't think I've ever seen him play worse than that, ever.
It was, I agree with you. I have not, and it's a single game. Maybe he should, at this point of his career, just be sitting second nights of back-to-backs. Good for him for playing, but yeah, my player of the week, playing the city of Los Angeles has kind of saved their season, and they'll have another crack at it. Their next game is against that same Lakers team, so yeah, hopefully it saves them again from a losing streak, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, they're powering up, right? I mean, the Lakers sat LeBron for the first time all season recently, and they got a narrow win over, I think it was the Rockets or the Hawks or someone like that. An inspired team, that's for sure. But yeah, I agree with you. As someone, that brings me joy to hear you say, because as someone that grew up in Northern California, as much of my identity was Leo's that random kid in school that likes the Timberwolves. People knew, like, oh, that's the kid that hates like the Lakers and LA sports. And so the fact that I'm living near here now, and that I'm married to a Laker fan, like, any of you share that, don't you dare. But yeah, seeing the city of LA as your play of the week is great. I love seeing it, the stolen history that they have there. They're just running out these old former MVPs, with James Harden and LeBron James, where it's like, all right, man, like y'all's time is done. Like, you guys can go ahead and sell your tickets and, have all that stuff. But, they got to come visit us now. And it doesn't bring me much more joy than seeing the Wolves being able to beat not only just the LA teams, but, also the Warriors earlier. So, they were this close from sweeping, California on this trip over here. So, yeah.
Yeah. My bigger picture thoughts, just kind of looking at the standings and looking at, I mean, they haven't played Oklahoma City. That's a team that is certainly a regular season perspective, and hard to argue in a playoff perspective, is better than the Wolves. Dallas would be another team that has clearly looked better than the Wolves, beat them. But other than that, in the Western Conference, I'm not really seeing a team like they played Houston. Maybe it's, again, just one game, but like, I don't understand how Houston is 16-8. That doesn't. I mean, I don't know. I didn't see that in the one game. Denver is struggling. There's
Yes.
talks of them wasting Jokic's
Jokic for
career. He had what, like 56 points and a loss to the worst team in the league, Wizards. Like
it took
Jamal
him
Murray's
48
not
the next day. Yeah, it took him 48 to win the next game,
to yeah. I don't. That's just like maybe they'll. I mean, as long as they have Jokic, like that's a team to
There's a
be worried
chance,
about,
yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
But the season is ahead of it. Like everything is still there for the Wolves, and I don't think. I guess the 1 seed's not really there for them, and maybe like probably not the 2 seed either. But like in the sense of like a playoff long stretch, everything's there for them. Like moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the standings. I mean, currently, right now, as we record this, OKC's first and Memphis is second, and we haven't played either team yet, right? And then, meanwhile, at the bottom, we have Utah and New Orleans, and we haven't played either of them either, right? So it's like we're really cutting our teeth against the competition that is going to matter later on. We're going to be jousting with later, and so again, there'll be some tougher matchups, but there's a lot of good matchups. We've barely played any Eastern Conference teams so far yet, only a handful of games, and so again, we'll have our chance to there's a couple good teams out there, but for the most part, that's going to be hopefully some easier victories. I know nothing's guaranteed, especially with this team, but yeah, I think it's not a bad place to be.
Yep, I agree. All right, on to our final segment here. 2 words. My 2 words are more rest, as this schedule. I think kind of the main downside of this NBA playing tournament is it creates a very weird schedule, and for a league that to me should be prioritizing trying to get rid of back to backs, it's making it harder because the Wolves just have like they have 5 days off again after having like what 4 days off. Yeah, four
Right.
days off a couple weeks ago, and then they have 2 games and then another 3 off days. Like it's just, I mean, obviously off days are good, but I think we all know like that they're paying for those off games, and they're not the only one with these breaks in the schedule. The reason they have it is because they didn't make the in season tournament. But I just, I mean, maybe the rest is good. Maybe after kind of another brutal loss that they get time to like regroup. Um, but yeah, I'm just interested to see how even more rest does for them, and I just kind of wish we could continue to play games every other night instead of these breaks in the schedule.
Yeah, I'm curious to see like if there was ever a survey or like how the MBPA was contacted about this to be like, hey, do y'all prefer if we have less back to backs, but then there's less long stretches of breaks and like what the players voted on. I mean, maybe it probably never even got there, but I wonder if the players or even like the sports science side of it is like recommending like, hey, it's better to have like 3 to 4 days off breaks and then like maybe a couple back to backs or whatever. So I'm curious about that. But yeah, they have to take advantage of the rest and not just to rest their bodies. Because again, knock on wood, the Wolves have been one of the fairly more healthy teams of most pretty much any team in the league right now. And so, they don't need the rest as much as they need the practice. And so, I definitely hope, I asked Chris Finch in the post game presser about like, what are y'all gonna spend these next 4 days kind of working on? Like, what are you hoping? He said, more foundation, more structure, defense stuff, running, some of the sets. Like again, the foundational, the fundamentals. Like he's trying to nail those down. And I think those fundamental things are what's holding the Wolves back right now as well. So hopefully use that time wisely.
Leo, your 2 words.
My 2 words, and I'm cheating here a little bit, Ryan, is rear view mirror. Now, rear view is technically 2 words, but I'm hyphenating that for this. And, you know, I don't know if you know, Ryan, but on most rear view mirrors, there's a little message on the bottom that says objects in the rear view mirror are closer than they appear. And I say rear view mirror as my 2 words because that's the Wolves right now. We may be 12 and 11. We may be tied for ninth or AKA the 10th spot right now in the Western Conference, but we're hot in the tails of the 4 teams ahead of them. We next, as you mentioned, we have the Lakers and coming up, and they're reeling right now. Who knows if LeBron's even going to play in that game, or who's going to be healthy? But even if they're healthy, I mean, it's not necessarily a team that's scary. Then ahead of them, we already beat the exhausted Denver Jokic's once. That's all they are. And we already won the season series against the Clippers. We beat them twice, and we only play them 3 times this year. And then we just split the home series with the Warriors. And so that's a team that's very beatable. And so I think the Wolves are coming. I think it was Jake Scraffs that put out that one image way back in the day, years ago, of Crunch on a motorcycle in the rearview mirror, saying that, objects in the rearview mirror appear closer than they are. And so I think that's kind of, if I had to sum up my 2 words, it would be in that one classic Wolves meme is rearview mirror.
There you go. Yeah. Well, hopefully the Wolves can get out of their own way, start winning games. We'll see. I mean, that'll be the biggest question for the rest of the year, kind of. Now that they've a little bit put themselves behind the eight ball, and how far up the standings can they get? I'm guessing that like the top three seeds might be out of reach, just in the sense of if they like one of two or three of the teams are going to go on a heater probably. But I think like last year it shows they don't need to be a top seed if they can. They obviously got to get out of the playing tournament. That'll be the biggest thing. But if they're the 4, 5, 6 seed, I think they still would have a great chance of going on a run, depending on how everything looks with the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan, before we wrap up today, I do want to put you on the spot here. Is what happens at the end of the regular season when we look at the offensive and defensive rating? What are we putting on the line here, man? As a gentleman's friendly 2 words Wolves pod host, that what are you putting on the line here? Are we gonna do?
Well, at this point, I'll say $1 million because I'm going to win.
Okay. All right, you heard it here, folks. We got $1 million bag. Brian's gonna help me buy a very affordable two bedroom, two bath home here for $1 million here in Southern California. So,
but that aside, we'll settle for a single beer. How about that?
a single beer. How about outrageous stakes? What about 2 beers?
That's just fine.
That's
Again,
your
I'm going to
max.
win.
All right, 2 beers it is, sir. You're on.
Awesome. Sounds great. Well, that's where we're going to wrap up for this one. For Leo, I'm Ryan. Have a good one.
Thanks, y'all. Get home. Drive home safe.